Hey, welcome all. This is Mike Horn from Vet the CEO and Pass the Guide On. Thank you for joining us. We're excited about today, and we want to share some great information with everyone. So I'll start out. You see the first slide in front of you. We're going to start out by introducing all of our participants, all of our panelists, and they're going to share a little bit about their background so that you have a general idea of who is involved in your conversation. So let's start out with Ben. Ben's from Murphy Business. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Ben?
Hey, thanks, Mike. Yeah, I'm a business broker for Murphy Business Sales and basically help people buy and sell businesses, figure out the value of their business. And my background, I have done my own businesses over the last 20 years, everything from consulting for inventory control, profitability, bars and restaurant space, to selling products online, to doing marketing company, doing some advising for tech startup. And over the years, I kind of evolved into working as a business broker. I really like working with small businesses. Now I really focus on helping them get from the next stage in their life, helping them plan to sell their business, ultimately help them sell their business.
Very good. Thank you, Ben. Larry, you're up.
Thank you so much, Mike, and hello, everyone. Larry Feltz. I'm a retired CPA from PricewaterhouseCoopers, but I failed miserably in retirement, so I became certified as a exit planning advisor, and it was a business valuation or a business value advisor, and launched out on a career of helping small business owners understand how to run and operate their businesses and how to be prepared at all times to transition from them. So hopefully today we can share some thoughts both to buyers and sellers about how exit planners and people like me can be of assistance to brokers and others that are trying to help you sell your business.
Perfect. Thank you, Larry. Thank you so much. So my name's Michael Horn. I am a business owner myself. And along with my friend John, we founded Vet the CEO and the Pass the Guide On program. My story is I retired from the Army. I wandered aimlessly for about 10 years, trying to decide what I wanted to do when I grew up. Was in the corporate world. I got whacked. So I bought an existing business, and I've been in the manufacturing business ever since then, and I will never go back. So that's my story. I'm going to be the monitor of today's session. And with that, Gilbert, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Hey, everybody. My name is Gilbert Seguid. I'm calling from sunny San Diego. And I'm a franchise business broker. And so what I do is I help my clients be able to find the right business, franchise business for them, working with both new franchise businesses and also existing businesses, franchise businesses that are for sale. And prior to that, I'm a Navy veteran. I served about 11 years. Just like Mike, I climbed a corporate ladder for a little bit. And then I realized I just wanted to be left alone. So, and basically what it means is I wanted to live life on my terms. So I created a business from scratch on the side, brought that to profitability and success, and then finally quit that job. And so now I have the honor of helping other veterans be able to acquire, their goals and dreams of being a business owner for whatever reason they have. So thanks for having me.
That's great. Thank you, Gilbert. And finally, John, you're up.
Hi, my name's John Panachone. I'm actually the guy that whacked Mike a long time ago. Sometimes when you run a business, you got to get rid of the dead weight. And unfortunately, he was part of that at one point. But I like to say I did a huge favor for him because that's when he went out and bought his business. So anyway, I too left the Army, wandered aimlessly for a bunch of years. During that time, I worked for small businesses, and I was on the buy side. I was part of buying 5 businesses before I started my own business in 2003. I did a startup, and then in the first year, I actually bought a business in that first year. And then 17 years later, I sold a business. And I like to say I had to have the smile surgically removed from my face after 17 years and successfully selling the business. But one of the things I remember about that, which is one of the reasons I'm passionate about today's topic, is even though I had bought a bunch of businesses in my career, and part of running my business was buying a business, it was the first time I had sold a business, and it was an entirely different experience being on the seller side. And, there's a lot I learned there. So, and I think that's true for many business owners, and we'll get into that today. So that's who I am. I'm also the co-founder of Vet the CEO, along with Mike. Back to you, Mike.
Perfect. And that's a big theme throughout the day. There's always a lot to learn in business, and there's a lot to learn in both buying and selling a business. So that's why we're here today. We want to spend some time talking about the process of buying and selling a business. We want to take a look at it from the seller's perspective on how exactly do you prepare for the sale of a business, because there are some logical steps that are important to go through. And when you're a buyer, how do you prepare to buy a business? What do you look for? What do you ask for during the process? And all of those kinds of things. Because as John said, a lot of people, they only buy a business one time and they only sell a business one time. So there is a learning experience that goes along with that. So our goal here is to have a discussion about how exit planners and brokers really add value to the process. We'll have a Q&A session afterward, but certainly you have a chat box. And if you have questions as we go along, please put them in there, and we will include those. So we'll start out by talking about the value drivers that are associated with a business. A business has certain tangibles, and we're all familiar with these. When we walk in a retail business, we see all of the assets around us, and needless to say, there are financials associated with those assets, and many people focus on those things, and those things are very important. But there are many intangibles associated with a business also, and those intangibles can be, in many ways, more important than the tangible assets, and those include the four things listed here. Who are the members of your team? What are your employees about? What kind of relationships do you have with your customers? What kind of technical systems and infrastructure do you have in your business? And finally, what is your brand all about? And how is your brand represented on social media? These intangibles are critically important, and they vary depending on the type of business you have or the industry that they're in. So we want everyone to understand that in the purchase or the sale of a business, there are both tangibles and intangibles. All right, so there is a basic process involved in buying or selling a business. One of the first steps, and we'll go into some more detail on this, is a preliminary offer. And once that preliminary offer is out there, there is a significant amount of due diligence on the part of the buyer associated with learning everything that can be learned about that business. In addition, that buyer has a significant step in determining the financing that is associated with how they're going to buy the business, because not every business is necessarily purchased by someone with a bunch of cash in their pocket, like John has from selling his business. The next big step in the process is a binding final offer. And this is an offer that, through which there's some negotiation. There's negotiation in all of these things, but there's that binding final offer. And once the offer is made and the offer is accepted by both parties, there is a period typically of transition that takes place that the buyer and the seller need to negotiate to make sure that the business successfully moves from one owner to the next. Now, included in all of those basic higher level steps, there are a boatload of other steps, and there's no formal legal process that we have to go through in the buying of a selling of a business. It's not necessarily like you go through with a house or a car, but there are reasonable and due diligence steps that we all need to go through to ensure that both the buyer and the seller are fully protected as this process goes along. And so included in that offer step is this preliminary purchase price. There's a list of things that buyers need to do to protect themselves and go through this list of due diligence steps that they want to follow. There's normally some coordination made by the buyer related to preliminary financing. This is very important because you don't want to get to the end of the process and find out that you don't have approval for the money needed for purchasing the business. There's typically a non-disclosure agreement. Sellers, just as well as buyers, are interested in ensuring that the terms associated with the sale are kept private. There is typically some sort of exclusivity period involved in the sale where once the buyer and seller agree, they determine some period which is exclusive, and then there's this non-binding letter of intent. This due diligence that I previously discussed includes just everything and anything that you can think about. There's typically a buyer is going to prepare a list of due diligence materials, and this is where folks like are on our panel come in to help us to put together this this due diligence list. A buyer is going to review the financials. The seller is going to review the financials and make sure that the financials are true and correct. The buyer is going to want to create some projections associated with those financials, because those projections impact not only the sale price, but they impact the ability to secure funding and many, many other things. The buyer will likely put together some kind of investor summary. If the buyer intends on going out and seeking investors to participate in the purchase of the company, this is a very important step that is in that due diligence process. Then there is a funding package that needs to get put together. And that funding package can have all kinds of moving parts. It can have loan parts from regulated or non-regulated financial institutions. It can have investors. It can have crowdfunding sources, private placement. There's just everything and anything that you can think of needs to be included in that funding package. So that package, the details associated with it are very, very important. In addition, there are regulatory filings that may be required. And so those filings need to be put together. And there is then a funding package at the end of that path that is going to assist that buyer in purchasing the business. Then we're going to go into the agreement phase of this operation. And the buyer and seller are going to negotiate this final purchase price. If there are attestations associated with it, they'll agree on those, or what exactly are the terms that they are putting together here and agreeing upon, because the devil is always in the details on the buying and selling of a business, from both a tangible perspective and an intangible perspective. So it's important that we all understand that. Then if there are employment agreements, those need to be put into place too. It's very important from a buyer's perspective that the team that buyer expects to be part of the transition remains as part of the transition. We certainly need to include a communication plan, and that communication plan is internal as well as external. We want to ensure that the right message goes out to our team, and we want to ensure that the right message is prepared to go out to all of our suppliers and vendors and customers and stakeholders. And then the final agreement needs to be put together. And that agreement is all about the details associated. Then an agreement on the closing date is put in place. Any assistance associated with that transition, if there are any adjustments that need to be made as a result of anything that may come up. And if there's a release holdback, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, that is negotiated and exchanged. But again, this is the high level process that that is included in this sale. So with that, we've gone over it. Everyone has access to the chat box. Why don't we start out with a couple of comments based on all of that from Ben. Ben, what do you have to say about all that?
Well, one of the things I always like to obviously you did a great job kind of hitting this on the high level. One of the things I like to bring up to everyone, just to give them a little bit of perspective on both the buyer and seller side, is, on average, you can see a different stats. You're looking at roughly 9 to 12 months to buy or sell a business. So just so it kind of gives everyone in mind that this isn't going to happen quickly. I mean, as you see, as he laid out, there's a lot of steps in this. There's a lot of negotiation in this and that. So it's definitely going to take some time to go through this process. One other thing, just to pop in, just if you're a seller, something to consider, because this can be a problem, is there will often be a non-compete. So you need to be prepared to be out of your industry for a while.
And that is an excellent point. And a non-compete is a very, very important thing. The other thing to consider is, depending on what state you're in some states, non-competes are very difficult to legally put into place, but they're still there. And if there is a non-compete or a non-compete, there may be financial cost associated with not allowing that non-compete to take effect. So that's a great point, Ben. It really is. Larry, how about from you?
Well, tears well up in my eyes when I hear the word non-compete. That's starting. But having been the victim of it more than once, yes, this is a great overview. And we were discussing a few minutes before we started, as a exit advisor, which is a misnomer. There are three numbers that I became familiar with in the certification process, and they were really sort of staggering. The first one is that 80% of the time when a small business goes out for sale, none of this will happen because early on, it'll be a determination the business is not sellable. We can go into why, and for none of the reasons are they, or for all of the reasons that cause problems, they are all overcomable, given time and effort. The second number is that 50% of the time, businesses don't transition on plan. There are several things that can occur: a death, a disability, a disagreement with a partner or somebody in the business, some sort of disruption. There are just things that happen that suddenly cause a necessity of a business to transition. And so the exit planning process starts on the day you own the business and continues throughout. And then the final number that I would talk to you about is that surveys would say 75% of the time, if you go through the process and you sell the business, 75% of the time the sellers are dissatisfied within a year of the sale, generally because they didn't have any plan for what they were going to do. You heard Mike say he wandered in the wilderness for 10 years. They didn't have any plan for what they were going to do. Their life has been in the business. They've woken up every day with a mission, things to do, things to drive their day. They wake up one morning, they don't have any of that. They don't have a hobby. They wonder who that other person is across from the kitchen table. They begin to worry about whether they have enough money to live because the net proceeds weren't what the gross proceeds were. And guess what? The gross proceeds weren't what they thought they might be going in. So those are some numbers, and owners need to beware. And I guess the final thing I would say is you made the statement that sellers may be the first time you've sold, but the other side of that transaction, 9 times out of 10, it won't be the first time that buyer has bought. So you're mismatched in the transaction right off the agenda. You don't know what it looks like to go through it. They have been through hundreds of them sometimes, and without good advice, you're in trouble.
Yeah, and that gives them a very distinct advantage when they have the experience of repeated experience of buying a business. Gilbert, how about from you?
No, the really great overview. First off, just based on the latest comments about the sophistication experience of the buyers, I have somewhat of a unique experience as a franchise business acquisition broker, working primarily with veterans. What I found with my clients that are looking to buy existing businesses is actually the opposite. I'm working with a lot of men and women that are retiring after 20, 30 years in the military. And instead of working to be a consultant or working for the federal government, they would rather buy a business, or an existing business, because they don't want to climb the corporate ladder, right? And so when it comes to the support, the education needed for this type of buyer, there's a lot needed, right? So my recommendation is always build a big team, a good team, actually, of your CPAs, your attorneys, just people that have experience in doing this. Because with my role, my goal is to be able to find that business for my clients, which there's a lot of legwork even before that whole process that Mike shared, to find the business that's aligned with their values, with their goals, what they actually want to do in the business. And that kind of comes into play with the slide that talked about the tangibles and intangibles. I always recommend, like, hey, you got to spend a good amount of time looking at the intangibles, right? Because the numbers are the numbers, right? The financials and the assets, but like, hey, what are you going to be doing in that future business? Is that something that you want to be doing in that business as the owner? Because, some of these small businesses, a lot of times the owner is the business development, the face of the company and things like that. It's not always ideal where you're just the owner and you have general managers. It's not that's not the case all the time. So so that's basically really looking at the intangibles and the validation, but also making sure that that business you're acquiring is a good fit for you as a person.
Yeah. A great question came in that I was thinking about, so thank you for asking it, Israel. Gilbert, what has COVID done to the franchise business? What impact has COVID had on folks acquiring franchises?
So similar to Mike Rowe, Dirty Jobs, what we've seen is the unsexy businesses have been very popular, right? And it'll be interesting to see what the numbers look like, because your home services, your HVAC companies, your electrician companies, anything that allowed somebody to be comfortable at their home because they're now working from home or they're sticking around home, they did really, really well. And what I saw was your gyms and your restaurants, not so much, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I've seen was just this influx and need, and people just really scooping up these service-based brands. And really, when you look at it and you look at an ROI and whatnot, definitely a lower investment of a business if we're looking at new franchises, but even the existing ones as well compared to a gym or a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it'll just be interesting to see, because they've been having skyrocketing average revenues within their franchise models and things like that, even just immediately post-COVID. So now that we're in 2024, it'll be interesting to see if that levels out or not.
Mm-hmm. What's your experience, Ben? How has COVID impacted?
One of the big things I saw a lot of was, there's a lot of talk about the silver wave, the gray tsunami that's coming through a lot of these baby boomers. And COVID got a lot of them really thinking about the future and kind of really thinking about life after work, life after their business, and kind of, instead of waiting, being like, maybe it's time. I want to go travel with my wife while I still can. So it really got a lot of people thinking about that ahead of time. And that the other one was, obviously, it was a super difficult time for a lot of businesses. Mm-hmm. So a lot of business owners really who survived it were exhausted and were also ready to sell. They were just, but also a lot of them had a lot of confidence because they did navigate something like that. What we're running into a little bit as a broker is you're sometimes having to kind of look back on 2020, 2021, and even 2022's numbers with a little bit of you have to look at them a little bit deeper, because some industries, for example, some of the restaurant industries had banner years in 2021. Right. Because everyone was excited to go out to eat. Everybody had stimulus money and people were spending a lot of money in these restaurants. A lot of them had record years in 2021. Yeah. On the other end, you had some businesses that had terrible years due to the supply chain restrictions and that. So we're really having to kind of adjust for those different financial fluctuations.
Mm-hmm. And Larry, have you had folks reach out to you? The folks that Ben was just talking about that have started thinking about exiting their business, are you getting calls from those people?
Yeah, we are, because that's the very point. The exit planning business was sort of birthed 10 or 15 years ago because there was this belief that there was a book written, The $10 Trillion Opportunity. And that book went back 15 years, and it missed it by 10 years because they thought that all these baby boomers would be selling their business when they got to Social Security age. Well, that was the farthest from the truth. People that have run businesses for decades aren't going to sell just because they turn a number. But now 10 years beyond that, now the average baby boomer's in his 70s, mid 70s, and they are coming face to face with reality that they don't have a choice. And now they need to begin thinking about transition, and they don't know anything about it. They don't know who the potential buyers are. They don't know the pitfalls. They have no idea what the value of their business is. There's so much they don't know. And so they begin talking to people, and usually they get sent to, their most trusted advisors, we find out, are their CPAs, their tax people. Sometimes it's their wealth manager. Well, a lot of these people are getting certifications or learning about this exit planning because it's becoming so prevalent, and there is this wave that's coming across now. So yes, there's a lot of activity. There's a lot of thought. There are a lot of PE firms that are out there trying to roll up these small businesses. And so they're getting contacted. They're getting letters from brokers. Brokers are sending these letters out in mass quantities saying, are you interested in selling your business? If you are, let us know. We're looking for businesses like yours. And so, yes, we're sort of at the height of this process now, I think.
Yeah, it's a very good point, Larry. It really is. One of the questions that many folks have is how much does it cost to get into business, and how do I minimize my initial investment in getting into business? And there are lots of ways to do that. I think that the thing that I like about franchising, Gilbert, is there is a franchise for just about everything that you can think of. And the cost of entry for those franchises can vary wildly. There is a cost associated with getting a McDonald's that is quite different than the costs associated with some other lesser known franchise. Can you talk about that a little bit, Gilbert, about the cost of entry for franchises and how that can vary?
Yes. So when we're looking at franchises, whether it be new or existing, there's usually two sides of that range, right? You got your retail, restaurant, gym, anything that you can consider you would have a brick and mortar, and you have to invest a sizable amount for your leasehold improvements, meaning the amount of money you have to spend on construction costs to make that subway look like every single subway in the world, right? That's going to be usually the bulk of your investment. And what I've seen with those type of those franchises, no less than 300, usually 400, 500, 600K for your initial investment. And so on the other side of that range is your service-based franchise businesses. So your product is the work that your employees are doing. Usually that happens at your customer sites, at their homes or their place of business. So that leasehold improvement really is lowered by significantly, if not everything, because some of those businesses can be done from home as a home-based business, or maybe you just go rent a small office with a little bit of a warehouse space or even a storage facility. So I've seen plenty of those businesses be below $200,000 of an initial investment. And traditionally, people will go the SBA route. And what the SBA says, just, throwing out just general numbers, right? You talk to your finance people for the exacts based on your own financial, situation. But usually what they look at is they want you to put at least 20% of that loan value down. And that's your initial injection. That's usually going towards your franchise fee or whatnot. And so, if you have a business that's 200K, expect to put $40,000 towards that franchise. I have helped a lot of veterans get into businesses that were below 150K. These are the service-based businesses, really great businesses, really great match for who they are and what they wanted. And there are some SBA loan banks that they were able to get in at a 10% down payment. So, around 15K of a down payment into that business. The only stipulation on top of that is that the SBA also has requirements of they want to see some post-loan liquidity. right? Some money in the bank, in your savings, in investments. We'll even count your retirement 401k if you need it, right? And usually that number is about 20%. So remember, after you get your loan, they want to see at least 20% of that loan value somewhere liquid, that if you needed to use it, they want to feel comfortable. The next stipulation, though, when we're looking at franchises is, again, the franchisors, they want to make sure they're finding the right candidate. And one of the biggest reasons why people fail in business is that they just ran out of money, right? They spend all their money on marketing or whatever, and they weren't properly capitalized. So on top of the loan, the bank loan requirements, some franchises have even higher requirements, such as net worth requirements or maybe a higher liquidity requirements. But each franchise is very different. It's all based on their previous experience with other franchises. Hopefully that answered your question.
It was an excellent answer, Gilbert. It really was. Ben, what do you have to say about that?
That kind of following up, that is one of the things that will make a difference with the SBA. You are looking at that, 10 to 20% down, and you're going to need some type of working capital post loan liquidity. The other thing with that is I tell people a lot of times, if they're looking for a business, is potentially go out and talk to an SBA lender, talk to their lender and get a pre-qualification letter or some type of, lets them give them an idea how much of a business they can afford and what they can qualify for. So it helps them kind of fish in the right pool for them, for trying to find the right size of business, something they can't afford, but also letting them understand that they will need to have some capital left over. They can't just spend it all on everything. They're going to need to have substantial left over to operate the business and handle the ups and downs.
Yeah. And do you deal with seller financing a lot in what you're doing, Ben?
Yes. And typically the way we work, especially right now, interest rates being a little bit higher, we're having to get a little more creative to get deals done. And typically what you're seeing with like seller finance is you'll have some type of down payment. You'll have a bank loan. Say the down payment's 20%. You might have a bank loan for 60 to 70%. And then you'll have that little gap of 10 or 20% that's going to be seller financing that helps get the deal done. Because it's one, if you're a seller, some people get really nervous about it. There's a lot of benefits to it. One, it attracts more buyers because it makes it more flexible to get the deal done, gives them a little bit more creativity. Also, too, is as a seller, if you don't need all the money right now, you're getting that money over time with interest. So there's some benefits to that as well. And you also have to consider, also for a buyer, having seller finance is attractive because that means the seller feels really confident in the future of his business. So it's kind of a win-win for both parties involved when you have some seller finance.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And Gilbert, what do you see with seller financing on the franchise side?
So with new franchises, I've seen franchisors provide financing. This is very few, but I have seen them finance only the franchise fee. And so that's the minority of all the franchises out there. They really do want you to come in properly capitalized. Right. But when it comes to existing franchises, so people that have owned their franchise for 15 years and they're looking to sell, or maybe they just had it for for 3 years and they're looking to exit for whatever reason, that's where I have seen some significant seller financing. I would say the majority of the deals I've worked with, they've always had the seller financing, and I've seen as much as 50%, which was pretty significant when you're looking at a $500,000 purchase. And then what I had my clients, what they did was they either got an SBA loan for the other half, or I've seen them, utilize some other means, such as maybe some equity in their home, or even roll over some of the retirement, which is they roll over for business startup, the ROBS structure. So there's definitely a lot more ways to be creative when it comes to the existing sell of a business versus the new franchise purchase.
And Larry, how do you help out in the case of seller financing? What advice do you offer, or what do you deal with in the case of seller financing?
Well, I think that's it's an interesting question that's often involved. We help on the entire financing by trying to make sure that the parties understand what's available to them and the different terms. Ben mentioned SBA. SBA has very attractive packages. If there's property involved, you can get financing up to 20, 25 years on SBA finance. So you can carry your terms out a long way.
Yeah.
I believe that there's always going to be an element of seller financing. I think the seller has to be prepared for that. Going into the transaction, they have to understand that that's probably going to be a requirement, and that's going to keep them involved. They're going to have an interest in the business. That works for them because they can see what's going on. They shouldn't be interfering, but they certainly have an interest to make sure they get paid. Usually they're getting paid. They may be subordinate to some of the financing, so they may not be paid unless things work out. From the buyer's perspective, it's good. I give you an example. I mean, I'm part of a company we're buying. We bought our first HVAC company, and we got seller financing. And the seller has been very helpful in introducing us to vendors and introducing us to customers and helping us understand the business and the community and the market, and has been really goodwill for us as he has introduced us favorably. So seller financing is probably going to be a piece that people are going to deal with. It's positive. And, you know, it's up until recently, you couldn't get much return for anything anyway. Often seller financing notes are higher than, normal investment rates. So the seller can get sometimes 7, 8, 9% on that financing for a piece of time.
Yeah. And from a tax perspective, there's some value associated with that to the seller also, right?
Yeah. I mean, surely is. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. All right. So let's start at the top of the list. Tell me, Larry, when is the best time when I am selling a business to bring in an exit planner? When's the best time?
Probably about 3 or 4 years before that.
There you go.
If you're just starting thinking about it, you're likely behind the 8 ball already.
Yeah,
because of some of the reasons we've talked about.
Yeah.
The seller usually has very little idea what the true value of their business is. They have very little idea what causes value. They think they're going to get some remarkable. They think multiples. I hear people talk about getting a 20 or something. The average sale of a business is going to be at about 3 to 3.5 times EBITDA, and EBITDA is going to be on average about 10% of the top line. So you could start there of giving a reality check to the owner, but also you can help drive that EBITDA up with advice, and by driving the EBITDA up, drive the multiple up. By having a more significant business, the combination of that could get you that significant money that you're looking for. But the average business is going to get an average price, and a lot of these businesses aren't even average. They think they are, but they don't have the depth in management. They don't have the good financial records that show their history. They can't show you the quality. They can't demonstrate the quality that they've been. They don't have recurring revenues that would get extra value. They haven't proven that they can expand their markets or their service lines. All of those things can be brought to bear by an exit planner. All of those things are accretive to the seller. And the fact that it can all be done, the buyer isn't going to pay you for that if they have to do it.
That's exactly right. That really is an excellent point. The buyer is not going to pay you for it. And One of the things that I've always observed is that small business owners really tremendously overvalue their business. And it just goes back to what you just said, Larry. It really does. How about a broker? How far in advance of my planned sale should I bring in a broker, Ben?
Well, so a typical broker is more going to be around when you're ready to sell. But I always, if you don't have a certified exit planner nearby, I would always recommend talking to a broker, and they can potentially introduce you to someone to get you, start to get you preparing properly. I work with a lot of sellers that are a couple of years out. I'm a little bit different than other brokers to help kind of point them in the right direction. The big thing I'm trying to do is educate them on the process. As we've talked about, half the people have never sold a business. I want to educate them on the process. And the other one is try to help them get an idea what the value of their business is.
Yeah.
I've had some really hard conversations with people and basically told them their business is worth half of what it is. And they've gotten very upset with me, but they've come back with me and being like, this is information I need to know. You know, that's one of the things. If you think you have $1 million business and you're going to have this retire and it's only worth half that, that really changes your retirement plan. So talking to a broker can help you, give you a valuation number to help you figure out what that number is. And the other thing I always like to try to stress with people, a business is an asset that can grow in value if you feed it properly and you treat it properly. A lot of people don't think about that. And where you can, like Larry pointed out very well, where there's things you can do to push that EBITDA up, push that multiple up, and get it so you get a much higher return than you would, especially if you're several years out, where it makes a big difference.
Very good. Very good. John, you got anything to add? You've been pretty quiet so far.
No, good stuff. I just think that time horizon is important that you just answered. Larry, you gave me a bigger number than I expected, but I think 3 years is a good mark. And I think before we started working together, I didn't even know that, even though I sold the business. But it's good to know the difference between exit planners and brokers and your roles and what time frame to bring you in. But I don't have any other questions, Mike. Back
All right, sounds good. So Gilbert, how long does it take to typically buy a franchise, keeping in mind that there is a great variety in the different types of franchises that are there? How long is that life cycle?
Usually, I recommend to clients 6 months to 1 year. Granted, I had clients that were definitely on a faster timeline, and they actually, from the point I talked to them actually signing the franchise agreement, it was 2 months. And that was because they weren't working with SBA or anything like that. They were self-funding. So there is that timeline with the approval of the SBA and getting funded, which could be as much as 2 months. But the whole process of finding the franchise, working with me, and then talking to the franchisors. And then the most important part, I think, out of this whole process is the validation, where you get to talk to other existing owners of that franchise model to be able to basically shorten that leap of faith that you have to take by validating and looking at their numbers and really seeing if that's the right one for you. But definitely, 6 months to 1 year, I definitely highly recommend that's when you start looking.
Yeah, and in the franchise business, that is a very valuable intangible. The ability to talk to other owners that may be near you or may not be near you about what their experience is with the franchise and how happy they are with the franchise. So that's another great value that comes with franchise ownership. Let's talk about fees for a little bit. We talked about SBA loans and franchise fees. How does the fee structure work with business brokers, Ben?
So typically, most business brokers will have some type of retainer or fee that they'll charge up front to work with them. Depending on the broker, depending on the size of the business, it can be a couple grand, it can be $5 to $10 grand. And other thing we'll a lot of times charge for upfront is some type of business valuation. And that's the same ballpark. That can be from a couple grand higher to 10 grand, kind of depends on what's all in the business valuation, what's all in the what the business size is. It's typically, that's where you'll see the start, and it's usually some type of retainer. And then the other thing you'll see, most business brokers really don't get paid, at least on the sell side, unless the business sells. And so we are success based, so we are definitely motivated to try to sell the business. And depending on the size of the business, you're looking at, for like a normal Main Street business, roughly 10% of business value is what your kind of standard rate is. It fluctuates on the region, fluctuates on the size of the business, but you're looking something like that in there. And kind of with that retainer on the buy side as well, we will sometimes do buyer searches, or we will represent people on the buy side. So sometimes there's a retainer on that as well. If a buyer hires a broker to help them either value a company they're looking to buy, or help them search for companies in a certain industry they're trying to buy.
Very good. Gilbert, what do you have to add on that?
Yeah, so with new franchises, there is no cost for the clients, because the franchisor, they do have a marketing budget to compensate brokers like myself. So it's a nice little business model for myself, because my commitment is to my buyers, because I do work with over 500 different franchises. I'm not committed or promising anything to any franchisor. It's more of like, hey, which franchise is going to be the best for my clients.
Yeah.
When it comes to the resale, sometimes like it does vary, right? Whether the seller is using a broker to sell their business, whether they're using the franchisor to help them sell their business, there may be fees baked into the costs for the seller.
Very good. And Larry, how do you fit into that fee structure? Where do you come in at?
Well, I have to talk to Ben after we get through. It's a difficult journey for us, and it's hard. It's interesting. It's a big discussion at the exit planning meetings. How do you do it? I think we all do it differently. Some people do it on an hourly basis. I tend to do it with a small monthly retainer and some success fee component of it at the end of the day, with an understanding we're not going to do this forever. I mean, if you engage us and we say it's going to be 2, 3, 5 years, if we're hanging out and there's no, it's not active, then we can always walk away. But we're generally trying to be just a very incremental piece of the deal. What I found with small business owners, and I will say this, and those sellers that are listening, the biggest mistakes I see are they look at a fee and it's a number bigger than they're used to seeing in their day-to-day business. And they immediately can't figure out how it could possibly be worth that. And so they won't do it. They won't they won't get the advice on the tax. They won't hire the CPA to give them some information. They won't get a valuation. They won't do a seller due diligence, which I would always recommend. The buyer is going to due diligence you off the face of the earth, and you're just going to let them buy you and not know what they're going to do. So we try to keep the fee reasonable, then have a success fee. And as it gets closer and closer to the deal and we see more and more, we try to layer that success fee. It's a certain amount of the first million, a certain amount of the second, and something over 3 or something. It's more than that.
Very good. Ben, can you talk a little bit about how do I go about finding a business for sale? What do I do? Where do I start?
Well, there's a couple. I mean, one, like I mentioned before, I highly recommend talking to a lender, get an idea of what you can afford. The big website, out there is Biz Buy Sell, where that's by far, we get the most traffic with Murphy Business Sales. We get the most of our traffic through Biz Buy Sell. There's a bunch of other websites, but that seems to be the big one. And I also highly recommend, if you're looking to buy a business, it is good, very beneficial to talk to a broker. You may not hire them, but depending on what you're looking for, if you have something specific, a broker can help you find something specific. If there's something you're looking for, or they may have know of things, other places to look, maybe listings that are in the works that's not ready yet. So I highly recommend you talking to a broker. And real quick, because I know that came up, someone asked about a business broker like recommendation. You know, if you're selling your business or buying, you think about it, it's 9 to 12 months. That's a long time. I highly recommend talking to more than one business broker, because you're going to have to deal with this person for the next 9 to 12 months. And you will find someone you feel is professional, someone you feel is a good fit for your personality, because typically buying and selling a business is a bumpy road. There's going to be some hard conversations. You're going to have some frustration. And so you really want to make sure you vet and kind of dig in and make sure you find the right fit for your personality.
And Gilbert, what do you have to say?
Oh, I second, definitely second that what Beth shared, personality, right?
Yeah.
Luckily, you know, I get to choose who I work with, and a lot of it really is personality based. You know, you want to, it's a very intimate, professional relationship where not only am I getting to understand your financial situation and whatnot, but really like everything about your family, your goals, everything. And, you know, if you don't like the other person's face that you're working with, you know, I mean, personality and whatnot, it's not going to be a good recipe. So, yeah, so that's all I have to share.
Very good. Very good. I appreciate that. I really do. Well, buying and selling a business is not something for us to go alone. I think the main takeaway for me is brokers and exit planners have a very valuable position offered in this process. And just going back to what Gilbert and Ben said, you've got to be willing and you've got to want to work with the folks that you're working with. So finding the right broker, finding the right exit planner is a critical step. And the earlier that we can start, the better off we're going to be. I put a slide up there with everyone's email address. So certainly if you have more questions as we go along, you are welcome to shoot them out to any of us. We have another event coming up here at Pass the Guide On, and that's small business acquisitions and exits. And we think that you're going to enjoy that too. You can certainly visit us on our website and come to see what we're doing on our application. So I'm gonna go around the room now, and I'm gonna start out with Ben, and I'm gonna let you throw out some closing comments in 30 seconds or less, Ben.
Thanks, Mike. I think the big thing for everyone to really take away from this is it's a much longer process than they would anticipate. So it's better to get started earlier than later, and maybe tempering expectations if you are a seller that your business may not be quite the price you think. Ultimately, we got to get a bank on board, and they need to lend money. So that's who we really have to convince when it comes to your business price.
Very good. Thank you so much, Ben. Larry?
Hot tip of the day. If you're an owner wanting to sell and you have 2 to 3 million in EBITDA, more than 50 employees, and you've got a good team that you would sell it to, explore an ESOP. You might be able to sell your company and get your proceeds out tax-free, and you can keep your legacy alive for a long time.
Mm-hmm. And I will add that I've seen more than one company do that. And it is very, very worth considering. There are some local companies where my manufacturing facility is located that did exactly that same thing. Gilbert, closing comments from you.
I know the latest trend for I don't know how many years is to learn everything DIY on YouTube. Selling and buying a business, you got guys and gals, please seek a professional, right? It's going to be well worth your money in the long run, and it'll definitely allow you to be more successful in that process.
I love that. I love that advice. John, closing comments to you.
Just one quick thing. If you're watching the recording of this and you have a question, you can hit the little Q&A little widget in your interface and ask us a question. It'll trigger an email to us, and we will answer your question. But for those that are here live, thank you for making it live. And for those of you watching the recording, we welcome your questions as well. Back to you, Mike.
Thank you all. Have a great day. We appreciate you attending. And as I said, everyone's email address is located there. You can reach out to us anytime. Thank you all and have a great day.